Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Reviewia Talks. Today we have a very special guest on our show. I will start with a brief introduction. In fact, his career and his profile is so illustrious that if I have to do justice to introducing him, maybe it'll take the entire show to do that. But I'll try my best to briefly introduce him. So he's an author, a coach, a talent management expert, a big stalwart when it comes to anything related to HR. He's the author of the book Dreamers and Unicorns. It's a book about the post COVID world of work. He's a very senior graduate from XLRI Jamshedpur. He was the chief learning officer of Wipro for almost 7 years and has been widely recognized for his innovative approach to learning and building a future ready workforce. The Forbes magazine calls him India's most interesting globalist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Abhijit Bhaduri. Abhijit sir.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here, Abhijit.
It's such a pleasure to have you on our episode this time. And we really appreciate the fact that you have taken out your time.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So, Abhijit sir, we will love to have your views on the area of candidate experience. Reviewia as an organization is committed to candidate experience. We are a review platform purely focused on getting candidates to share their experiences about interviewing and the entire experience that they have with potential employers. And given your work, your experience, your understanding of this space, and there have been so many occasions when you have used the social media to share your views on this topic, you're pretty much the best person to educate our audience more and more about this area. So I have a set of questions which I would like to ask you and hear your perspective on them.
So I don't know whether I can qualify as the best person, but I have a point of view, having been on both sides of the table and then sort of looked at it from a distance. So I'll try my best to put across a point of view. I hope that it's going to be useful to your audience. So I'll give it a shot.
Perfect. So my first question is, why do you think the problem of candidate experience is still largely unaddressed by organizations?
So I sort of think that partly it has to do with demand and supply. So in an area where the employer actually goes with the mindset that there is abundant resources and you're replaceable and interchangeable. That was actually the nature of work that we were doing. I mean, if you sort of really look at workplace and workers, it's a sort of a triangle that all three are interrelated. So a change in any one will always impact the other and vice versa. So if you sort of really look at the nature of work, pretty much except for the last 2 decades, maybe where the internet changed the nature of work. It was largely manufacturing. It was mass production. So it really didn't matter whether you were doing the work or I was doing the work because it was a standardized process. So the focus was on standardization and scale up based on standardization. So economies of scale were driving the business models. If you fast forward and sort of really look at where the scenario is today, and over the last 2 decades, as I said, it's been building up towards this. The nature of work has changed because what creates value today, is also the big ideas. What creates value is the uniqueness. What creates value is innovation that the individuals bring forward. So, in many ways, the model that one saw, let's say, when I worked in advertising and communications, at that point of time, that model today is becoming far more mainstream. And so, therefore, the importance of the individual becomes much more. What it means is whether you do the work or whether I do the work, there can be a huge difference in the quality of output. I recently wrote a post where I talked about why the 1% is completely different. I mean, if you look at Michael Phelps, he's won more medals than many nations put together. Or if you look at Madame Curie, Madame Curie, her husband, her daughter, and her son-in-law all have won the Nobel Prize. There is no other family which has a similar thing. So the top talent in fields which require complex thinking and work and all of that. I mean, where the individual makes all the difference, and that can be sports, that can be creative fields, and increasingly in businesses as well. Then the importance of the individual is very important. It sort of rises. Therefore, candidate experience could not have become more important earlier in retrospect because the nature of work was such. So it is going to become more and more important. So you are in the perfect place, I should say, where you are really asking people for their review of the candidate experience. So yes, this is the perfect time.
Okay, thanks so much for the encouragement. Great. So my next question is, given the change that you just mentioned, where the nature of work is altering, and there is a fair bit of impact on organizations if they don't get it right in terms of getting the right person on the job, what are the costs which an employer has to pay for not focusing on candidate experience as of today?
So, when you think about the whole notion of candidate experience, it in some sense, it is sort of a phase two, if you will. I mean, because in phase one, companies started to, as the nature of work changed, the companies started to focus on the employee experience, really starting to think about, the employee experience. So you go one step back, you would see that the focus was entirely on sort of really looking at the customer experience. And then, and organizations have historically been far more open to doing anything with the customer experience rather than the employee experience, because as I said, employees were interchangeable. So really it didn't matter whether one got replaced by the other. Today, that's not true. So employee experience. And now when you're sort of really getting into a phase where that kind of work is going to be more and more difficult to do by, sourcing talent from anywhere and everywhere. You're really trying to zone in as much as possible on the right person. So the experience, becomes far more important. If you look at it in terms of the customer experience, people no longer buy, a product or a service. They're actually buying the experience. So the reason why, when you think of the movement towards the intangible factors, which is one of the 5 shifts I've talked about in my book, Dreamers and Unicorns, that shift actually means that, when you look at the actual sort of value of, let us say, a cup of coffee at the local corner shop, what it costs versus at an upmarket coffee chain, the difference is not the coffee. The difference is in all the other sort of elements that go with it, the experience of it. So in the same way, when you think about, when you look at e-commerce, the value is not necessarily going to be about bringing the product that you paid for. I mean, that is a minimum expectation. If I've paid for something, I want it delivered. The differentiation is going to be, how quickly I can get it. So instant gratification, or for that matter, does it come in, undented or not damaged? So the packaging becomes important. Are you using it sustainably? That becomes important. So all the intangible factors, the brand of the company, are they going to keep my money safe? Can I trust you? All of these things actually mean that the value and differentiation, even in things like e-commerce, which is, at first shot seems to be completely mechanized. The value is not going to come from, delivering the product. It's going to come from the way that you sort of change the service in and around the product. And that's where your revenue is going to come in. So, Amazon actually leverages, all the other things, like, for example, Prime Video, etc., in order to boost, what they do by way of Amazon Prime membership, because they find that people who are Prime members actually buy a lot more. So it's a very clever idea to not charge for the, movie, the entertainment, the emotional aspects. And that really, it's the experience of that entire experience of membership that they are focusing on, rather than just to say that, okay, you pay for it, we'll get it to you. Of course, that's there. They are getting it to you fast. They were the first people to do same day delivery in a few hours and all that. And now it's expanding to many other regions. But broadly, the model is the same. You're not paying for the product or service, you're paying for the experience. In the same way, the candidate is not going to join you because you're going to pay them. I mean, of course you will. But what's been my impression of you? Do you really care about people the way you claim you care about? Do you really respect my uniqueness? Do you really think that will you be flexible when I raise a point? Do you have a reputation of treating your candidate right? Because eventually an employee is a candidate who likes the experience. So if the person doesn't like the experience, you cannot turn a candidate into, it's the conversion aspect of hiring. So that's why it's going to become even more important.
Right. Great. So the next question is, given we are in the middle of a pandemic which has pretty much changed everything, for humanity, and of course, the changes that we are seeing in the professional landscape. How do you think employers need to alter their employer branding strategy? So I'm kind of asking a slightly broader question, maybe not only focused on candidate experience, but in general, how do you see employers need to adapt when it comes to branding themselves, as an employer?
So a couple of things to keep in mind. Brand building is a long-term process. It doesn't work when you release an ad just before an event and then sort of get it. I mean, that's a very transactional view. And when companies do that, it's the candidates understand that your view of talent is also transactional. You're not investing in sort of really attracting the right talent because you need me, on the first of the next month. That's why you're releasing the ad on 30th. But you've never communicated with me for the rest of the year. So your view of talent is very transactional, and I think majority of the companies fall in that. So because the view is that we sort of create that candidate experience, and it comes from the mindset that of interchangeability of the candidate. Whereas if you really sort of look at the top talent, a top coder, according to Gates, is like several hundred times more powerful than an average coder. So are you ever going to be able to attract the top talent? I mean, think about it. Pick your whatever is your top organization, most aspirational organization, if you had to describe one, and pick another one which is lower down in that category, and kind of say that both are releasing an ad for, let's say, a coder. Then in which case, who do you think can get away if they offer a slightly lesser amount as well? The candidate is going to go for the one which has got a better reputation. So things like employer brand becomes very important. And the employer brand is built not just based on what you say, but how well do you listen to the candidates? How well do you sort of tweak your opportunities based on what people are looking for? And I think the model of employer branding has to be taken on a far more long-term basis, because it has got a couple of different elements to it. To what extent do your leaders, not just one person, to what extent are your leaders able to sort of really engage the audience and become talent magnets? So does your CFO have the ability to attract the top talent in finance? Does your marketing person have a kind of a following which says that, if tomorrow people will be falling over themselves to want to work with you? So that means that you're really not looking at just one individual, you're looking at, the entire leadership team. More importantly, who's saying that? Are you getting a marketing agency to do that speaking for you? Because, everyone can figure out when you are putting somebody else speaks on your behalf on social media. It's very obvious. You don't need to be told that, okay, this is clearly, some intern in a marketing agency has put out this post. But on the other hand, the really powerful organizations, some of which I've had the opportunity to see at very close quarters, leverage their employees, and they have people designated who help the employees become brand evangelists, and that's far more powerful. I mean, think about it. If you're applying for a role, whose word would you trust? The CEO who says it's a great company, come and work for us, or the average person who's employed there who says that, you know, I worked here for 5 years, I love this place? Who do you think has more credibility? Ironically, it is the one who has no power, who has no designation of glamour, who's actually the more powerful one in social media. So the brand is actually built today on authenticity rather than, you know, on clever copy, if you will. So that's the big difference.
Great. So expanding slightly more on this topic, specifically for startups, where they don't have a brand, they're very early stage, people don't know about them. Maybe they have a couple of rounds of funding. What would be your recommendation? Because every startup wants top talent, right? They want the best guys to come to them. However, this area of employer branding or having a plan to attract talent seems to be missing in most startups. So what would be your recommendation to these early stage, startup founders on how should they approach becoming a talent magnet?
So if you really look at the, couple of different things that happen in startups, the founders are really people who know how to build the product. They've thought about product market fit. They've thought about all the tangible things. They know how to raise money, etc. All of that. Most of them have no special ability to attract talent, and so because if you think about it, most of them, have a very primitive view of talent, and sometimes it's based on the one company they have experienced something in, and most of them are not specialists who understand what talent is all about, and so I think being able to craft a talent strategy and finding how your talent strategy is going to change over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years is just as important as sort of having a product roadmap. So do you really have a talent roadmap? And most founders don't, because one giveaway is when the founders say it is so important, I do it myself. It's really like saying that I think health is very important, so I will never go to a doctor, I'll do it myself. So it's really something like, it's a very naive version of what they believe talent is all about. So being able to, you have to understand how talent works, being able to identify top talent, being able to nurture them and have them groom and create the right kind of place where they in turn attract other talent. And once you invest in that talent, it is only your culture that sort of makes that talent stick around. So sustainability is built in through culture, but the first two are really important too. So in order to be able to have a powerful talent brand, you have to have a leadership brand, and talk about it. And that's an advantage actually, organizations which are in the early stages have, because they can provide a lot more opportunities for people. But when they don't do that, they are limited to, the 2.5 people who can read their ad or who get the phone call. So they are really limited by that. So that's a very outdated, antiquated model of talent. So one way to think about it is if founders have to go beyond product market fit and they want to build an organization, then you have to have specialists who run your talent function. Most of startups don't even have an HR person. I mean, they have somebody who does payroll and does hiring, but there's nobody who talks to them about talent strategy. So it's a very large chunk which is missing altogether.
Great point. I think that's a very valuable point that you brought out. So remaining in this topic,
the startups are going to hate me for saying this. They are really good. but that's true.
Yeah, that's the truth. So one constant complaint that we hear from the talent acquisition fraternity, or these founders of young startups who are looking to hire young talent in their early 20s, fresh graduates, is that these guys are very unreliable. We offer them and then they just vanish. They leave us within 2 months, 3 months. So it will be very interesting to hear from you. Uh, what do you think is the psyche of this young talent? Maybe something is definitely missing. If a young candidate or a young employee is leaving an organization in 3 months, it's not that he or she would have planned it like that. So something might be missing. So it'll be good to hear is if there is a missing piece that most organizations haven't identified when it comes to attracting and retaining young talent.
Yeah, young or old. I mean, talent is talent. If you think about it, um, why do people leave an organization? It's because they find the work not meaningful, or somebody has overpromised, or so somebody is not listening, or there's an element of mistreatment or harassment or inequity. There can be 100 reasons. What happens is when people um, sort of start organizations, as I said, they're so completely blindsided by the product and the fundraising and sort of doing all of that, they have very little time to focus on talent, which is the reason why I said in my previous response that you actually need a very, very super strong talent development, attraction and talent development person. So talent management in its totality, um, you have to be able to do that. So when people sort of look at their attrition data, and you kind of say that people don't want, they're unreliable, maybe instead of looking at the candidate, you need to look at the leadership team. That's where the problem is, that sometimes the experience is wrong. I mean, most people are not able to sort of decipher uh, your good candidate from an average one through an interview process, and most of them don't really rely on any other assessment process, because everybody feels that this interview is about asking a terrific question and then stumping the candidate to discover their capability. I mean, that's a very outdated view of how hiring is done. Yeah. So, for example, you're really looking to identify soft skills, because cognitive skills can be taught. I mean, everybody who's learned more than one language has taught themselves that particular language. But when it comes to the skills of working together with somebody, being able to learn, take feedback, work together, listen to the customer, these are all soft skills. And most of the times, people don't have ways to assess that. When your top talent is creating a toxic workplace, most founders will not address that, because they'll say, oh, we are going to do an IPO in a couple of months. Let's not mess with this guy. And so the place becomes toxic, and a whole lot of other people leave, which in any case is going to delay your plans for an IPO. So instead of replacing that one person, you are now replacing 15 other people. And then, that becomes like a cascade, and you're replacing more people. So I think when you are looking at, that's why I said that to have, with your product strategy, you have to have a parallel talent strategy, which sort of, moves along with your product roadmap. So you have to have that talent roadmap to be able to do that. So that, I think, is the first starting point I would look at.
I think this is brilliant. You brought out some amazing insights, which will be very useful for organizations. Okay, so that brings us to the final question of today's episode. What would be your message to CHROs, talent acquisition leaders, CEOs, and founders when it comes to candidate experience? What is the message that you want to leave them with?
So I think, when you look at design, and if you sort of I've worked with some of the organizations in designing candidate experience, for example. One of the things that we do is to really start thinking like a candidate, because it's only that, a person who travels by air cannot design a great railway compartment. A person who travels by the train cannot design a great bus, the comfort of that. And so you have to be, the first element of design thinking is probably the toughest, which is how do you step into the customer's shoes? In this particular case, how do you step into the candidate's shoes? The simple things, the way your ad is framed, is it sexist? A lot of them take great delight in saying things like ninja, and we are looking for coding, hack masters and all kinds of things, which people don't realize that, sometimes it puts off exactly the kind of candidate that you're looking at. So to sort of really, and in many of the organizations, to be able to actually sit down and think about the candidate experience, because when the organizations become large, they have a different kind of a challenge of solving the candidate experience. That work is done, there is somebody who handles, let's say, scheduling, and somebody else who handles the seating arrangement for the candidate or travel arrangement. Well, that's a different department. And so the more moving parts you have, the more complexity you're building into the system. So how do you create imagine, you're sort of booking a cab, and then you go into one app to, put down which distance to which distance. You log out, go into another app and sort of decide which cab is going to be the closest. Third app decides, how much you're going to pay. Fourth app decides where are you going to pay, and do you get a refund if this guy doesn't show up. Think about that experience. This is exactly what most candidates go through. Typical one experience of it, speed matters. So for many people, when you are not selected, it's okay to tell the candidate that, I'm sorry, I found somebody better. But, you kind of say, that person is useless anyway, let's not do that. You don't realize that person is bad-mouthing you to 20 other places. And maybe the next friend that this person spoke to was exactly the kind of talent that you were looking at. So how do you sort of really treat every candidate in a manner which makes it a fair process, which makes it, a speedy process? You get back to the candidate in the shortest possible time and make it a priority to be able to, as if you're wooing a really important person to come and join you. If that's not the mindset, you're kind of saying, oh, that's a junior coder, so, why bother about it? You will never design something which is, which is going to be terrific. Because it's really like saying that, a airline's rating is not decided by the kind of wine that is served in the business class, but it's decided by the comfort of the seat in the economy class, the kind of service you get. Are you heard? Do you sort of come across as people who care and listen? So, to be able to take the transactional aspect of it and turn it into an emotional, caring experience requires a very different mindset. Transaction is, the person has to, go through these 5 places and I'm done. The emotional part of it is I'm trying to woo this person to come in and have a terrific experience so that the person actually goes above and beyond. To have a person go above and beyond means you first need to go above and beyond. Because in give and take, give always comes first. As a friend of mine said once in one of the podcasts. So he said that my dad used to say, in life there will always be give and take, but remember, give comes first before take. And I think that's a great way to look at candidate experience.
Great. I think the last statement was really putting everything into perspective. Give comes before take. Fantastic. So Abhijit sir, it was great having you on our show. I think your pearls of wisdom when it comes to candidate experience would be very valuable for everyone. While I am running a candidate experience review website, but whatever you shared with me as well, was very, very insightful. So I'm sure it's going to be highly valuable for our audience. Thank you so much once again for taking out time and joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and keep up the good work. I think you want to become the equivalent of a Glassdoor for candidate experience. What a fantastic area to work in. So all the best to you and good luck for your dreams.
Thank you so much once again.